I'm Sisi Kate Patchwork and here is Stephen Downs, contributor to the theory of connectivism and connective knowledge, and one of the facilitators on CCK08 and CCK09. Good morning, Stephen. I wondered if we could have a little chat about groups and networks and what they mean for learning and teaching in classrooms.
Good morning, Sisi Kate. It's good to see you back on CCK09.
I'm really interested in the ideas of connectivism, and how I can apply them in my classes. So what is a group then that makes it different from a network?
The actual distinction between groups and networks, as described at length in my various writings, is based on 4 dimensions. 1. Groups emphasize sameness, networks emphasize diversity. 2. Groups emphasize order and control, networks emphasize autonomy. 3. Groups emphasize borders and membership, networks emphasize openness. 4. Groups emphasize additive cumulative knowledge, networks emphasize emergent knowledge.
By that distinction, my class is more like a group, because we know who is in it, and who is not. However, I would like my students to become more autonomous, and go beyond the wall of the classroom using the opportunities that internet-work technologies offer. I'm very supportive of my students making connections outside the class, and I like to think that I can help them do this.
While you join groups, you interact with networks differently. Specifically, you create connections, interactions, with members of a network. Over time, such interactions may cause you to be identified as part of the same cluster as the person you interact with, as part of their network, in other words. But it's a gradual thing, and there are no clear boundaries.
How is the theory of connectivism, or any theory, going to allow the teacher the opportunity to improve teaching and learning, to recreate themselves to use the new tools, or simply to allow the students to use them to expand their personal learning resources?
Connectivism is a theory for learning. It seems clear to me that in endeavors where we, as a society, would prefer reason to prevail over emotions, we should prefer to organize ourselves as networks, rather than as groups. Education, it seems to me, is probably one of the most critical areas where this needs to be the case. There is no shortage of people wanting schooling to fulfill not only a learning, but also a socialization function. And this, then, is where passion in schooling begins to subsume reason. This, then, is where the teaching becomes less a matter of cognitive function and more a matter of indoctrination.
But I want to make my classroom a place where students experience learning activities that help them make sense of what happens in their lives and in the world in general, to become knowledgeable, ethical social beings. I wonder what would happen if we all came in one day and the desks were gone, replaced with pillows and decorative rugs on the carpet, colorful cloth walls and a plate of couscous for sharing. We'd do different things, I bet.
The manner of teaching is not to tell a child how to behave, but rather to model and demonstrate ethical behavior, which the child will practice and reflect upon, forming ethical principles in his or her own mind as massive sets of connections between neurons, formed via the principles of association.
But part of my role, however I try to exercise it with restraint, is to manage the classroom and learning activities.
For me, it should be up to the learner to decide when to take control, not the teacher. Connectivism is a network theory of learning. Networks are forms in which the values of autonomy, diversity, openness and emergent knowledge are promoted, are robust, dynamic, stable, reliable. They are good knowledge engines.
I don't find the distinction between groups and networks to be very helpful, as it seems, in your version at least, Stephen, to be normative. Networks are good, groups are bad.
It helps because it is part of the course content. I'm getting very tired of students in this course saying I disagree or you're wrong, without giving me even the faintest clue about what it is that seems wrong, much less concrete evidence that they've read the work they are disagreeing with. This isn't a confessional course. You do not need to profess your faith one way or another. I don't care whether or not you agree or disagree with me or anyone else. What I do care about is that you have understood the theory sufficiently as to have some reason for disagreeing.
CK08 and CCK09 seem to be like networks in terms of their open access format, voluntary participants, diverse viewpoints, diverse modes of interaction, decreased gatekeeping, but the writers who express their ideas most extraordinarily, rather than the most intelligent posts, rise to the top. But also they seem to be like groups, when the technology fragments the content, and in itself having assigned readings, recommended tools and the structure required to offer course for credit suggests an instructional model that may inhibit free expression. If I got snippy, I would also say sameness is valued, as dissent gets challenged, with expectations of defending a point of view with reason and references. Also the knowledge is additive and cumulative, growing on what has gone before. So it may be that I will combine aspects of networks and groups in my classroom setting.
What George and I have stressed throughout the course is not learning occurs best in networks, but that networks learn, and, arguably, in my view, networks learn better than groups.
It seems ironic that in Illuminate and at conferences, you are simply lecturing at an audience in front of a PowerPoint slide that explains how lecturing to students in front of PowerPoint slides doesn't work in education.
Ha ha ha.
Thanks, Stephen. This has been a very interesting and informative discussion.
Yes, thank you to Sissy Kate.